Hi, I'm Rudy Rucker, and I'm reading you some short science fiction stories with Ann Arbor here. These stories appear in my nonfiction book, The Life Box, The Seashell, and the Soul, which is a book about the meaning of computation. The idea being that a life box would be a sort of computer model of a person, but yet you feel you have a soul. But there are certain kinds of computations called gnarly computations that generate things like complex seashell patterns, and these bridge the gap. Anyway, the book has 6 chapters: a chapter on computers, a chapter on physics, a chapter on biology, a chapter on the human mind, a chapter on society, and a chapter on philosophy. And the story I'm going to read to you now introduces the chapter on society. And this story is called The Kind Rain. Linda Nguyen stood under the bell of her transparent plastic umbrella, watching her 2 kids playing in the falling rain, each of them with a see-through umbrella too. First grader Marco and little Chavella in their yellow rubber boots. The winter rains had started 2 weeks ago and hadn't let up for a single day. The nearby creek was filled to its banks, and Linda wanted to be sure to keep her kids away from it. Marco was splashing the driveway puddles, and Chavella was getting ready to try. Linda smiled, feeling the 2 extra cups of coffee she'd had this morning. Her worries had been ruling her of late. It was time to push them away. She was a web programmer marooned in a run-down cottage on the fringes of Silicon Valley. She'd been unemployed for 7 months. The rent was overdue, also the utilities and the phone and the credit cards. Last week her husband Juan had left her for a gym rat hottie he'd met at the health club, and her car's battery was dead. There had to be an upside. The worn gravel driveway had 2 ruts in it, making a pair of 20-foot puddles. The raindrops pocked the clear water. The barrage of dents sent out circular ripples, crisscrossing to make a wobbly fish scale pattern. "I love rain," whooped Marco, marching with his knees high, sending big waves down the long strip of water. "Puddle!" exclaimed Chavella at Linda's side. She smiled up at her mother, poised herself, stamped a little splash, and nearly fell over. Linda noticed how the impact of each drop sent up a fine spray of mini droplets. When the mini droplets fell back to the puddle, some of them merged right in, but a few bounced across the surface a few times first, the stubborn ones. It would take a supercomputer to simulate this puddle in real time, maybe even all the computers in the world, especially if you included the air currents pushing the raindrops this way and that. Computable or not, it kept happening. Linda was glad to be noticing the details of the rain in the puddle. It bumped her out of her depressed mood. When she was depressed, the world seemed as simple as a newscast or a mall. It was good to be outside, away from the TV and the computer. The natural world was so high bandwidth. She swept her foot through the puddle, kicking up a long splash. Her quick eyes picked out a particular blob of water in midair. She saw its jiggly surface getting zapped by a lucky raindrop, then watched the tiny impact send ripple rings across the curved 3-dimensional shape. Great how she could keep up with this. She was faster than all the world's computers. Linda kicked another splash and saw every single drop's dance. It almost felt like the water was talking to her. Coffee and rain. "Puddle bombs!" shouted Marco, running toward his mother and his sister, sending up great explosive splashes as he came. "No!" shrieked little Chavella, clutching Linda's hand. But of course Marco did a giant 2-footed jump and splashed down right next to them, sending Chavella into tears of fury. "Wet!" she cried. "Bad!" "Don't do that again," Linda told Marco sternly, "or we're all going back inside." She led Chavella down the driveway toward the tilted shack that was their garage. With the owners wanting to sell the land off to developers, nothing got fixed. The house was a scraper. The dead headlights of Linda's old car stared blankly from the garage door. She'd been putting off replacing the battery, expecting Juan to do it for her. Was he really gone for good? It was dry in the garage, the rain loud on the roof. Linda folded her umbrella and used her sleeve to wipe Chavella's eyes and nose. While Chavella stood in the garage door scolding Marco, Linda peered out the garage's dirty rear window. Right behind the garage was the roaring creek that snaked through the pasture. It was deep enough to sweep a child away. As if in a dream, the instant she had this thought, she saw Marco go racing by the window, headed right toward the stream with his head down, roaring at the top of his lungs, deep into his nutty hyper mode. As Linda raced out of the garage door, she heard a shriek and a splash, and when she reached the banks of the brown, surging creek, Marco was gone. "Help!" she cried, the rain falling into her mouth. And then the miracle happened. A squall of wind swept down the creek, drawing a distinct arrow in the surface. The arrow pointed 20 yards to Linda's left, and at the tip of the arrow the rain was etching a moving circle into the stream's turbulent waters. Not stopping to think about it, Linda ran after the circle with all her might. Once she was out ahead of it, she knelt by the bank. The circle drifted her way, its edges clearly marked by the purposeful rain. Linda thrust her hand into the brown water at the circle's center and caught Marco by the hand. Minutes later they were in the house, Marco coughing and pale with cold, but none the worse for wear. Linda carried him into the bathroom and set him into a tub of hot water. Chavella insisted on getting in the tub too. She liked baths. The kids sat there, Marco subdued, Chavella playing with her rubber duck. "Thank you," Linda said, although she wasn't sure to whom. "But I still need a job." Looking up, she noticed rain running down the window above the tub. As if hearing her, the rivulets wavered to form a series of particular shapes. Letters? Was she going crazy? Don't fight it. She wrote the letters down. It was a web address. And at that address, Linda found herself a job maintaining an interactive website for the National Weather Service.